Hello Internet, I'm Zon, and welcome back to another sprite drawing challenge video. It's been a little bit since I recorded the last set using the randomizers to create different sprites, and I figured it'd be a good time to revisit that process and work through some new ones. Rather than go through a kind of long-winded intro, I want to use the same randomizer that I used before to create the last two that would have gone up on YouTube. And the randomizer is the Seventh Sanctum series of generators. And just like we did before, I'm going to use the legendary creator generator up here to spit out a random creature, and then I'm going to try and draw it based on the description that it gives us. And we'll go ahead and jump straight in here and have it give us one. Alright. This being was formed from the skulls of the gods of anger. It looks like an artistic merger of a man and a scorpion. It has milky white skin covered in grass green blotches. Okay. I'll put this on the side here. Just like we did in the previous series, we'll be working in Photoshop and trying to figure out how to combine all of these different things into a single creature. It says, formed from the skull of the gods of anger. Phrasing on that's a little weird because it says formed from the skull of the gods. I think what it probably would have meant would be singular skull of a god of anger, as opposed to a single skull of multiple gods, which doesn't really make sense. I guess what we'll do as far as the themes in the sprite, we'll keep that idea of some sort of skull theme or feature as part of it. It says, merger of a man and a scorpion. That's going to be an interesting challenge. What we'll do, just like we've done on the previous sprites, is work with a primary and try and get a rough idea of what we want to do for the creature, and then once we have the primary, then we fill in the details. I think what I'm considering as far as how to approach this very strange combination of themes would be to use the idea of a scorpion body, kind of like a monster girl theme, where it has a sort of human torso and combined with the body of a monster. But the positioning is something that's going to be a challenge. Because I'm working on some semi-restricted canvas size here, I have to come up with something that's going to not take up too much space, but also give me enough room that I can kind of capture all of the details and follow the description here. What I've kind of roughed in here, which might not be a bad start, is the scorpion body, this lower area here. And I started putting some hands on the legs. And then what we could do is have the quote-unquote human torso up here. And then maybe try and find a way to put an upper body of a person up here. and then have scorpion tail over here. What I can try and do to save time is maybe copy and paste these feet or hands. I think I'm in the wrong window. And then copy them to the other legs so I don't have to redraw it every time. Like so. I might have to move them around a little bit. In order to make room, since there's going to be 6 of them, I want to say scorpions have 8 legs and 2 claws. If we need to, we can always ask the Googles about the references for the things that we're drawing here. Now the question of how to deal with the arm. We could have the arm going down this way. And ending in a hand or some sort of claw here. That could be a way to address that. Other thing I was thinking as far as how to do this would be to have the arm going this direction. But the problem is it makes the design a little bit busy to have the arm kind of crossing out over here. Because I don't want to obscure the scorpion body here. Let's see. Put the other legs over here. That looks like it could work. Sort of get everything into position. Again, this is just the primary, so it doesn't have to be final. Just want to sort of get everything in place and see if that gives us enough of a start to work on the rest. And the thing I'm most concerned about for all the ideas here is that it's going to be too cluttered and everything's going to be too crammed together. But we'll continue to work with what we've got. Let's start filling in the details. This is the tail. I could put the scorpion stinger over here. And the arm, I could leave this as a closed fist over here, and then maybe if we have space, make this creature wielding like a weapon, like a sword or something like that. That's a possibility. I think that's slowly getting there. For the head, what I was thinking for the head, because it mentions the skull of the gods of anger from the description, what I was thinking for the head, which would also save me the trouble of trying to draw a human face on this thing, would be to give it some sort of monster skull looking thing as the head. As we try over here and take the basic shape. Let's just imagine some sort of monster skull. Give it a few horns. Make it asymmetrical. Something you'd expect from a quote-unquote god of anger. And then if we move that over here, might be a little too big. Let's get rid of the placeholder here and see if we can get this thing to fit squarely on the shoulders. If we sort of pare down the edges and make it not quite so bulky, that might be scaled properly to kind of fit on the body there. Once we have the primary and the general shape of the creature sort of set, then I can move on to cleaning up the outline, and then that'll sort of speed us up a little bit here. But first, let's see if we can get the skull of whatever it is we're creating on the body. And that's not too bad. I think this skull might still be a little bit big, but if we scale the horns down, just shave a bit off, then it won't look quite so disproportionate, and I think that'll actually work for what we're trying to do here. Just bring this in a little bit. And then now we can slide it down. And this should look like it has two horns. The idea here was that it has sort of a single horn in the middle, and then a couple other ones coming off the side, going out, sort of a kind of a triceratops design. And we'll keep the skull separate for now, but ultimately if we end up going with this for the final, I'll need to merge the layer with the skull onto the body so that it's one continuous thing here. But we can continue to sort of clean up the outline. And then I think that'll work for the pose. Obviously, as we proceed here, we can clean up some of the details and kind of add in things or take things out as necessary. So I think I'm going to move on to the overall line art cleanup portion of what we're doing here, and then we'll see what it looks like and if we need to add anything else before we move on to the coloring phase of this particular drawing. What I'll do is I'll just start working through the outline, cleaning up the different sections like I've done before. And what I'd like to do for this portion of the video, kind of like I did on the previous ones, is take the time to sort of convert this project and this video into an informal podcast so that I'm not sitting here droning on about nothing while I'm just deleting pixels and cleaning up the line work. So the stuff I wanted to talk about in this particular session actually has to do with the trip I took recently to PAX West. At the date of recording this, it's the end of September. PAX West was at the beginning of the month, right after the long weekend for Labor Day. So I wanted to take the time to sort of go through my thoughts on the event, what I did, what I saw, anything noteworthy that I think would be interesting to keep an eye on, and whatnot, since I've never gotten the chance to do that for any of the times I've attended PAX and talked about it here on the channel. Like I mentioned, the event itself was at the beginning of the month over the holiday weekend. What I do every year, I go, and I have attended all of the PAX Wests that have been in the Seattle area, going all the way back to the very first one in the mid-2000s. What I do when I go there now is I will stay in Seattle, in the city, close to the convention center where they hold the event, and stay with some friends of mine. We'll chop a hotel room and stay downtown in the city so that we don't have to drive or catch the bus to and from the event to get there every day. We can just be on site and not have to worry about the logistics of getting out there early or staying late and missing buses and all that stuff. And what we end up doing, the event itself is 4 days for West. It starts on a Friday, and it goes Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the final day is Monday. And what we do when we stay down there is we'll sort of plan how we want to attack the event every year. We'll look at the posted schedule that they have, see what events or panels, if any, that we want to catch are there. And then we'll go to the event and just sort of proceed through seeing different things. And we'll do that for the entire weekend. If you've never been to any of the PAXs, be it South, East, West, or Australia, it's basically a giant video game convention, kind of like E3, but not really restricted to people like press. It was originally promoted as sort of a quote-unquote E3 for all type event. And the main focus of PAX is video games. And what you'll get are a lot of developers and companies that are promoting things that are coming up, going to PAX to show off the upcoming builds or projects they're working on to sort of get people interested and raise awareness and give people a chance to try things like the demos. And sometimes they have swag or things to give away. Sometimes they're selling merch. It's a pretty big amount of things to do there. And in addition to just games, they also have a pretty strong focus on tabletop or board games. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, since that does come into play for what we spent time on this year. But for the gaming aspect, there's a massive exhibition floor they have in the convention center, and it spans several auditorium spaces on that convention center floor, and that's where all of the developers and companies are demoing or showing stuff off. As you can imagine, that's a ton of people walking around and lots of crowds, and if you're trying to wait in line to demo some of the things that are being promoted, then you can be standing there in the convention center hall for a long time. What we typically do is, on the first day, on the Friday of the event, we'll go through and make our way to the exhibition floor, walk through and just see what everyone's showing off, see which companies are there, and try and come up with a mental map of what we want to do for the entire weekend. If there's something really compelling that we want to try and wait in line for, we'll make a note and then try and plan that into the overall schedule for the weekend. Otherwise, the first pass is meant to be kind of like a sighting out the area, figuring out what we're going to do and whatnot. And overall, the things on the exhibition floor were interesting this year. There isn't a whole lot of upcoming games that I'm specifically keeping my eyes out for. There's a few of them. They were showing off an upcoming action game called Code Vein, which I know people have been talking about for a while, and that looked really interesting. It's kind of a character action-ish, vampire, anime-looking game. The Capcom folks, of course, they're there every year. They were at PAX promoting Iceborne, which, as the day of the recording, the Iceborne Monster Hunter World expansion has come out. So, at the actual event itself, Capcom had a massive booth set up with a big statue or display of one of the Elder Dragons, Velkhana, from the game. And you could wait in line to play one of the most recent builds for Iceborne. I believe it was one of the demos that they had released in coming up to the game's actual release. There was a demo on PS4. I can't remember if Xbox One got the demo as well, but they had done over a weekend. It was a playable demo that you could download for free and try out a couple of the in-game hunts. I actually didn't get to try the demos. I was busy with a lot of other stuff, but I knew I was going to get the game when it came out, and I have been playing it a lot when I'm not working on this stuff. And Iceborne is fantastic if anyone is trying to consider whether or not it's worth buying. But Capcom was there at the event. A lot of the major developers were there showing off different things. Overall, it was a lot of interesting things, but nothing we really wanted to wait in line for. So we mostly just walked through and kept looking around. I will say, before I move on to the next part of the drawing here and get back on topic, for stuff that's coming out soon, the game that caught my attention the most, that I'm really looking forward to, is actually a game being developed by Yacht Club. And they're the folks who did Shovel Knight. And Shovel Knight is a fantastic game, which maybe I'll play on the channel at some point. They have a new title coming up that I hadn't even heard about, and I believe it was called Cyber Shadow. It's a two-dimensional action type game, very similar to Ninja Gaiden and a lot of the older action games from the old school era. What I can tell, you're some sort of cyborg ninja, and you're running through different environments and fighting bosses and all sorts of stuff, and it looks really neat. The sprite art for that game looked just phenomenal, which is what got my attention when we were walking through, just looking at stuff that was being demoed. And I went to the Yacht Club Games Twitter, and I followed them right after that. I figured I need to keep this on my radar so I don't forget about it. The game does not have a release yet, a release date, as far as I can tell, at least as of when I just checked a couple weeks ago. But it looks like they're releasing Cyber Shadow on all manner of platforms. I'll probably pick it up on PC so I can play it and maybe record it for the channel. But overall, it was a really impressive looking game. And if a game has really good sprite art, that's one thing that'll get my attention relatively quickly. So even though it was not something super big, that was my most interesting takeaway from the event of things that I'm looking forward to coming out soon. So definitely Cyber Shadow is on my radar, and I'll be keeping my eyes peeled for any announcements coming out for that. Alright, getting back on topic here. I think the basic line work for this will do. I thought about trying to incorporate the other legs and showing them on the other side, but I think that would be difficult because of the position here. I'd have to show the legs that are running on that side of the body. And rather than make the design really cluttered, I think I'll leave it the way it is. And what we can do is merge the head down and then start working on coloring. The line layer here, and what I'll do before I forget, I think what I wanted, the effect I want to have for the skull's eye here is put some sort of color on the inside to look like something is shining from within the skull as opposed to just having this be the head. But what we can do is create a new layer underneath and start working on the coloring. The description that we had here says it has milky white skin covered in grass green blotches. What we can do is try and come up with a base palette for the skin. I don't think I want to go pure white. Maybe kind of an off-white or cream color can work here. The upper body. One thing I was thinking about doing, if we were to follow the sort of quote-unquote monster girl idea here, would be to have the upper torso be a distinguishing color just to show that it's kind of the quote-unquote human aspect, and then go with a slightly different color for the body. I wonder if we could do more of a sandy tone for the body. Keep it similar because we want to be able to put the grass green splotches on the body as sort of like a pattern. We could do it like this. Go for this sort of sand color, which is keeping with the scorpion aspect. Maybe do a different color for the stinger. Maybe something like a purple for the stinger. For the head, we'll go with gray, like a skull. And then we'll go for the claws on the feet the same way. For the grass green blotches, what we could do is go for a darker green patterning and do kind of like stripes on the body, and then do spots or stripes on the human torso part, and then do spots or more splotchy patterning on the body itself. If we were to do something like that, it would look kind of like this creature has tattoos or kind of like a tribal patterning on the body, which might be a good effect and sort of mix up the way that the coloring is. And then if we go down to the body, rather than do specific patterning, we can do different kind of splotchy bits of green color. You can do some on the outsides and some on the limbs. We'll just make it really random, so it looks kind of like patterning you'd see on an insect or other type of animal. And then when I do the shading, I can shade different parts if they fall within the shadow line here. And it'll kind of blend in with the whole color scheme. And then maybe we could put kind of stripe patterns along the tail. And maybe I'll do like a kind of venomous thing. I think I've done that on other scorpionish type designs that I've done in the past. And then maybe what we can do separately, I'll do it on a separate set of layers, is give this creature a weapon. Maybe like an axe or something like that that it can be holding, since I chose this kind of clenched fist looking pose here. For the eye, I think I have to do the eye on a separate layer too, because I built the sort of black coloring into the line work. I didn't make it a color layer, so do something like that, and then I can shade. I can shade that so it looks like the pupils inside and sort of glowing in the skull. And overall, I think that'll do for the base color. Now we can work on the shading. It'll go from the top down, starting with the skull. Using the clipping mask will allow us to shade on the layer directly below what we're doing, not have it spill over. We'll put some shading around the eye socket of the skull here. And then we'll do the claws, since the claws are the same shade. I think the shading on the body is going to take a little more time, because I'll have to address the green sections instead of just the body's main color. Gotta add some more splotches down here. Alright, we'll do the upper torso. Go with a slightly darker shade for the skin or flesh tones here with the human torso, and then we'll shade in between the green parts, and then I'll get the darker shade for the green sections and do that before we move on to the lower torso. Like so. And we'll go for darker forest green on the green patterns or stripes. And now we can do the body. We'll go kind of a dark brown color for the scorpion parts. And then we'll use the same shade of green on the splotches once we do that. And then should be almost finished with this particular piece. Looking at the clock, some of the other ones I've done have run much longer than this, so we're making good time. This thing looks like a monster you would fight in an RPG, something you fight out while you're walking around the overworld. And I guess the last thing we'll do once we get through shading the rest of the body would be figuring out the weapon. But I don't think that'll take too long. I've got a couple ideas in mind on how I want to address that. And I think that'll do for the main body. Now we just shade in sections that need to be darkened, and that should do it. This part is always more time consuming, just because you have to be really careful about where you're coloring and make sure it's matching with the way you're choosing to have shadows fall across the drawing itself. Wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, but I've managed to make it work so far. Then we'll shade the tail of the stinger. And the eye, which we'll do one layer above here. Too dark. And then put a lighter highlight here. It'll give the effect of shining from within, like I mentioned before. And I think that'll do it for this. Now we can look at doing the weapon. We'll create a layer above for now, and then actually I'll create a folder here that I can group everything in. That way it doesn't get confusing. I'll call this weapon. And we'll go through and do the line work first. I wonder if I want to do a sort of axe-looking weapon. Maybe we can do sort of like a broad axe. Kind of like that. And then we just need to clean up the details around it. What I'll do is separate all of the things below this into its own folder. That way I can just turn it on and off. Call this main. And put this in here. Like so. Now we can just turn it off. Like I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, I can't remember if it was one of the other sprite drawing videos or the retrospective when I started talking about all these particular projects. But initially when I was doing this, and people would have seen it on stream as well, I started drawing these Pixel Sprite things in Paint. In MS Paint, the most basic and low-tech of graphics options. And doing stuff like this and working on multiple layers is not possible in that software. So it's a good thing I figured out how to configure Photoshop to do this, because it would be considerably more difficult to try and do this level of detail in Paint. And what I could do, maybe if I really feel like torturing myself later, is do like a MS Paint sprite drawing challenge where I can only work in Paint and I've got to create something like this. But for now, I'm happy with doing this in Photoshop, so it can at least be a bit more efficient of a process. Okay, I think we're just about done with the basic shape here. Add some of the details in here like so, and now we can move on to actually coloring the axe, and then we'll shade it and then make sure it's in place with the rest of the picture, and then we should be done. We'll go with sort of a tan wooden color for the main body of the axe and the handle. And then this thing up here could be like a lapis stone or something that's set on the handle, and then the blade itself we'll do kind of a gray rocky color. Actually, I think I'd rather it be more metallic. We'll do more like a bronze or brass color. That'll look a little bit better, I think. Just don't want it to be too similar to the Scorpion's body, which similar. Maybe if we go a little bit lighter. It'll look more like an axe made out of gold or something like that. A golden axe. Yeah, I think that's good enough for the color. Now we just have to shade it, and we're just about done. Go darker brown for the axe body. We'll shade more down here because it'll show that it's being held in our creature's hand. Maybe we could put some wider highlights on the blade of the axe to give it kind of a shinier look. Maybe we can do that over here. Just do something like this. Where would the light be? Maybe the light would be further over here. Maybe do something similar, put a highlight on the stone, show that it's shiny. Trying to figure out where would be a good place to put this. Maybe down here. And then add a little bit more up here and on the top. And that should be good for the weapon. Now if we just change the hierarchy so the weapon is underneath the main body, then now it is currently being held by our creature here. So if we zoom out, we now have our skull-headed scorpion man thing. Overall, it does seem like an RPG enemy that you'd see, or maybe some sort of boss that the main character would fight as part of the story. I'll put this in its own folder so I can move it around the canvas. yeah, I think that'll do. That was a bit more challenging of a sprite to create. The level of detail and, or at least all of the different working parts were kind of a challenge. But overall, I think the results turned out decently. And I'll have to figure out what to call this thing later, but I think that will do it for this one.